From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
What has happened is an absolutely explosive growth of groups on the radical right in general. As a matter of fact, we've never seen this kind of growth. The white supremacist groups have grown, not so spectacularly, but other kinds of groups, what we used to call militias back in the 1990s, have grown at an absolutely unbelievable pace.
The notorious white supremacist Frazier Glenn Miller has been charged with killing 3 people at 2 Jewish community sites in Kansas. He served 3 years in prison on weapons charges and plotting the murder of the founder of the Southern Poverty Law Center. We'll speak with the center's Mark Potok, as well as a broadcaster who interviewed Miller. Then, the New York Police Department says it's abandoned a secretive program that spied on Muslims.
Not only were they creating listening posts and going into our restaurants, coming to our events, acting as clients in our organization, they wanted to actually have someone who would be a deciding figure on my board. They'd have access to donors, access to information, access to financial information. And I think that we keep learning that the program is just more outrageous. And what it does is it creates psychological warfare in our community.
Then deadly environment. Nearly 1,000 environmental activists and land defenders have been killed in the last decade. The death rate's risen in recent years to an average of 2 activists a week. Among the dead, José da Silva, a Brazilian conservationist who campaigned against clear-cutting trees in the Amazon rainforest.
That's when the logging industry started to arrive. And that's when the attack on the forest began, along with my fight against them. That's when people started coming after me.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Ukraine and pro-Russian separatists are staging rival shows of force amidst a growing risk of violent escalation. Ukrainian soldiers moved in to retake government buildings from the separatists Tuesday, sparking at least one clash in a provincial airfield. Meanwhile, separatists in the town of Kramatorsk seized armored personnel carriers and a tank from the Ukraine army. Ukraine and Russia will be joined by the U.S. and European Union for talks beginning Thursday in Geneva. It's the first time Russia and Ukraine's foreign ministers will meet face-to-face since the crisis began. At the White House, Press Secretary Jay Carney said the Obama administration backs Ukraine's incursions to retake buildings from the separatists.
We appreciate the government's statements that any actions it undertakes will be gradual and responsible, and we agree that the use of force is not a preferred option. That said, the Ukrainian government has the responsibility to provide law and order. And these provocations in eastern Ukraine are creating a situation in which the government has to respond. The best way to de-escalate this situation is for the armed militants to leave the buildings they have seized.
A U.S. airstrike in eastern Afghanistan has reportedly killed 3 civilians. The victims were identified as a woman and 2 children who may have been camping in tents. Afghan President Hamid Karzai has called the attack a violation of U.S. and Afghan agreements. The U.S.-led NATO force says it's investigating. The Iraqi government has closed the Abu Ghraib prison, the site of the notorious U.S. abuse scandal that helped bring Bush-era torture policies to light. Iraq's Justice Ministry says it's shuttered Abu Ghraib over fears it could be overrun by Sunni militants. This month marks the 10th anniversary of the release of photos that showed U.S. forces torturing Abu Ghraib prisoners. The UN Security Council held a session Tuesday to view photographs documenting alleged war crimes by the Assad regime in Syria. A team of 3 international prosecutors has obtained images from a Syrian defector showing emaciated and mutilated bodies, likely resulting from torture. The defector is said to be a military investigator who handed over thousands of photographs he'd taken of the regime's victims. David Crane, chief prosecutor of the Sierra Leone War Crimes Tribunal, said the images provide direct proof of industrialized killings by Assad.
What he brought out over a period of 2 years is direct, specific, provable evidence of widespread and industrialized killing not seen recently. And the reason I underscore this is, and I'll highlight it again, it's a rare thing in our business that we get this type of direct evidence. But it's direct, provable, sustainable, beyond a reasonable doubt evidence of war crimes, and crimes against humanity being conducted by the Assad regime.
In other Syria news, anti-government rebels have reportedly obtained a shipment of U.S.-made missiles for the first time. Agence France-Presse reports a unit of the Free Syrian Army received the TOW missiles from a Western source. Hundreds of people are missing after a passenger ferry sunk in waters off the Korea Peninsula. The South Korea ship was carrying close to 500 people on board. Around 180 have been rescued so far. At least 2 people are confirmed dead. An owner of the Bangladesh garment factory where hundreds of people died last year is facing charges of murder. The collapse of the 8-story Rana Plaza was one of the worst industrial disasters in history, killing 1,135 garment workers and injuring over 2,500. Bangladeshi police say they'll charge Sohail Rana with murder as part of indictments against around 40 other people. The disaster's first anniversary is next week. The New York Police Department's disbanding a controversial spying unit that targeted Muslim communities. The so-called demographics unit secretly infiltrated Muslim student groups, sent informants into mosques, eavesdropped on conversations in restaurants, barbershops, and gyms, and built a vast database of information. But after years of collecting information, it failed to yield a single terrorism investigation or even a single lead. The program was established with help from the CIA, which is barred from domestic spying. In a joint statement, the group's Muslim advocates and the Center for Constitutional Rights called the decision a long overdue first step, saying, quote, "What has to stop is the practice of suspicionless surveillance of Muslim communities, not just the unit assigned to do it," they said. We'll have more on the story later in the broadcast. Retired firefighters and police officers in Detroit have reached a deal that would mostly protect pensions in the face of pressure to accept large cuts. The workers are among some 30,000 retired and active public employees who face threats to their retirement benefits following the bankruptcy filing by Detroit's emergency manager last year. Under the new agreement, members of the Retired Detroit Police and Firefighters Association will keep their pension benefits, but cost of living increases will be cut in half. The deal is the first between Detroit and a group of public workers since the bankruptcy process began. It's contingent on over $800 million in outside funding from charities, the Detroit Institute of Arts and the state of Michigan. The Obama administration's also reportedly in talks to add $100 million in federal aid. A ceremony was held Tuesday to mark the first anniversary of the Boston Marathon bombing. 3 people were killed and 264 wounded when a pair of homemade bombs exploded near the race's finish line. Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick and bombing survivor Patrick Downs, who lost a leg in the attack, paid tribute to the community response and the resilience of survivors.
The thing we witnessed in the aftermath of that vicious attack last year, and that I submit we are here today to celebrate, is precisely that sense of community, that enduring and transcendent display you and so many others showed last year of kindness and grace.
To our fellow survivor community, what would we do without each other? We should have never met this way, but we are so grateful for each other. We have shared our despair, sense of loss, and challenges, as well as our hope, gratitude, and triumphs.
Oklahoma has enacted a measure that bars local officials from raising the minimum wage. The new law blocks an effort underway in Oklahoma City to raise the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour. And Arizona has enacted a measure that allows surprise inspections of state abortion clinics without first obtaining a warrant. Critics say anti-choice officials could use the law to disrupt clinics' operations. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.